They say the lives happen when you're too busy making plans, and today is one of those days. StreamYard decided to do a maintenance in our last show of the year. I don't know. In the beginning, I was thinking, oh, I'm nervous because of the guest that we have today. And people has been going ballistic asking, who is she? And my question is, who are you? Do you don't know who she is? Today, talking with her, says, I have a nickname for you, and I hope you don't get offended. Guns and Lipstick. Why? She was the most elegant woman on the FBI, named by all the gentlemen and other ladies, but still can put a bullet between your eyes wearing her stilettos. She was the first woman in the BI unit, and we're going to explain the difference between a BI and all the names they want on the FBI. But she wasn't the first woman on the FBI. Let's be clear. There were many women on the FBI, but she was granted the first time a space on being a woman on the behavioral unit. That's how badass this lady is. I met through her to our dear friend Gina Osborne and says, you haven't met Gina? Says, my hands starts from like, you know Jana? Like, who doesn't know her? And that's how I was introduced to her. And when I asked Elba, you want to be on the live? Like, I don't know why you're asking. So Elba, before we bring her to the live, are you okay? Are you nervous? Are you willing to handle this?
Nervous. It's like, okay, when you ask me, and if I want to be in a show, I'll say like, that is not a question. I'm going to be there.
Well, let me to introduce the one and only Jana Monroe.
Oh, Susan, thank you so much. It is such a pleasure to be here. And I really like the way that you've coined me. I like that, guns and lipstick. I think it's great. I take it as a compliment.
Let me tell you who Jana, only to know. Have you ever heard the name Jeffrey Dahmer, Ted Bundy, Ed Kemper? That we agree. I know it's weird for people outside the circle, but Ed Kemper is my preferred serial killer. We're going to explain why. Don't get that out of the context. We are special people here. Eileen Warnos, most people doesn't know, they know her as a monster. She was a serial killer with a horrible background in Florida. And you were on the Timothy McVeigh, Oklahoma bombing. Any of those names sounds familiar? Sadly, because I'm sadly saying because of people don't know your amazing career, most people know you as the lady who was called to train Jodie Foster to have the things together when they record The Silence of the Lamb. And actually, a little bird told me that the FBI need to use a special PR person to manage the amount of women who decide, I'm going to be on the FBI. How the heck? And I want to start with something that we talk. When you were 13 years old, what show you were watching with your dad? And that's the reason you decide to be, because when she says like, oh, you must be kidding me, that's what I did.
So, Susan, that's where you and I think really connected, is when we were talking about this. And it's Columbo. And for younger people, if you have not seen this, you should, but you have to put yourself back in the time frame. But it was a father-daughter bonding experience for my dad and I. And we would watch it. And I think the reason it resonated, yes, he's a man, he's a male, because there were no female detectives or police officers in that
Charlie Dickinson wasn't on that time, or the Charlie's Angel, like no, kind of.
Angie Dickinson came later on Pepper, right? But okay, don't even get me started with Charlie's Angels. That's the most unrealistic, wearing hot pants and stilettos while they're on a tractor in the farm. And I mean, no, come on. So no, that's not a role model. So Columbo was far more, and this is what also Susan and I spoke about, because he was so underestimated. And that was used as a great tool. I think both Susan and I have been blessed with having this eye for detail. So that came naturally. That was like in the DNA. But then as you're watching this show, here's this bumbling detective who, even appearance-wise, you know, he did have a glass eye. That was something that had happened as a childhood. So he looked a little disheveled. He was wearing a raincoat or an overcoat that was all crumpled and wrinkled. So you just discounted him. And that was something that he used as a tool, which today we might refer to as a superpower. And that's what I could relate to, is because as I got into my career from the police department to the FBI and on, I was constantly underestimated. And instead of getting mad or defensive, I thought, wow, this is a great tool.
And I want to make a pause there, because when I talk to women, says, Susan, how you can denigrate yourself saying that the best tool you have is playing dumb. The best technique is when they don't see you coming. I always says that I look like the second wife from an old lady, high maintenance, still gonna empty your wallet until I open my mouth and says, oh, pardon me, you don't see me coming. We need to take the assets that you have. That in the field, the ones who make success are not the cocky ones, are the one who knows how to play with the rules in their favor. And you play with those rules, nobody see you coming, and it's nothing in your life that you didn't conquer, at least professionally on the field, under the circumstances. You make a movement.
Yeah, I think you hit a real point there, is using the things that you have with you, your own tools, and that societal or cultural of underestimating. And that's true of most women. And if a woman happens to be attractive, then they're just oogling and looking at that. But it seems to be this fallacy that if you're attractive, you can't also be smart. You can't have both of those things. And even if you're, let's just say by some standards, unattractive, then it's like you're invisible. You said they don't see you coming. I think if they don't see you, period. So you can use that invisibility to also see a lot of details and get a lot of information with nobody paying attention.
The first time they tell you no was when you went to a career fair asking for information, what education you should have or should conquer in order to fulfill your dreams. And that was the first time it says, oh, you says no, wait for it. And the second question is, have you ever met the guy again who says, look who I am now? I want to be so satisfying. Come on.
Well, let me answer those in reverse, because I'm going to respond viscerally to what you just asked. The second one, no, I did not ever see him again. And I wish I could have. That would have been a joyous occasion. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I went to a career fair when I was starting college. The purpose was I knew it was going to be an upward hill battle. And I wanted to take classes that were going to give me more experience, education, to make me more competitive to become an agent. Well, the nice man, well, he turned out not to be a nice man, but what he said, he goes, oh, no, you can't be an agent. You're not qualified. I said, of course I'm not. I'm starting college. I want you to help me take classes to be qualified. He said, no, you can be a secretary or a rotor clerk. And in the FBI, a rotor clerk is a file clerk. And I said, well, no, I'm going to be an agent. He said, well, that will never happen. So instead of being deflating and defeating, to me, that was inspirational. It's like, oh yeah, because I knew I could do it. And it was just these silly requirements at the time that were the obstacles.
So with that no on the table, let's go to the second time that says, okay, I'm going to go to the police academy. And you were in the juvenile system, correct? At least now it's called the juvenile system, seeing the worst relationship between parents and kids.
Right. Yeah, so they called it like a juvenile officer, and this was in the state of California. And it was those children that were incorrigible, right? Well, that word can be misleading because it sounds, you're thinking of like somebody 10 who, just won't go to school or something. And I ended up working on some of the worst of the worst. And the reason they were not like in prison is because they were actually too young to be, if they were 16 and under. And so we had kids that had been convicted of really violent crimes. And then you also had the parents, which I would call, they were simply biological parents. They were absent when it comes to actually raising or teaching values. So unfortunately, I had I'll refer to them as a caseload of those type of people. And that was my growing up experience in the criminal justice system. And it motivated me to get more credentials to move on to the FBI.
I don't want to put you in this position because I know that the devil knows for being old and being the devil, and not only the degrees and what you have seen about human race and human beings. I don't think any psychology PhD can expertise in all the career. That help you to understand better the mind of criminals when you understand that some damage is done on the young age?
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I'm not going to say so much empathetic, but understanding. Yes, when you look at some of the horrific backgrounds that I would read about when I was getting somebody that was going to be somebody where I was managing, so like on a caseload. I mean, it's despicable, some of the things that, well, as you well know, humans do to other humans, but we're talking about in a parental household and some of the upbringing. So it really did provide that understanding as why somebody might be defensive, why they have zero respect or understanding for authority, why they don't trust anybody. So you try to say, I'm here for you, you can trust me, and that's just shoved off. They can't internalize that.
Let's be clear. I'm not justifying at any point the decisions you made in life. You have nurture, nature, and you can be a sociopath, psychopath. Is between Jeffrey Dahmer and a president of a company. That's the only reason. But what I'm saying is, you'd look on Jeffrey Dahmer, Bundy, Kemper, the Kemper upbringing, Eileen, Timothy McVeigh, all those people have a ruin. And I think that most interrogators and people who work in those cases, they're really good interviewing them and talking with them because they understand where they're coming from. And instead, like those CSI effect with all the shows showing like, yeah, book, and like, no. The reality is you need to have such a nurturing approach.
Absolutely.
That even says, oh, I understand when you actually in the bottom, it says, I want to just kill you.
No, you are so correct. You have to have somewhat of a detached clinical approach, but yet give that sense of empathy or sympathy, because they're still human beings. You know, when you look in the spectrum of 0 to 10, and we'd like to think that maybe we're at 9 and they're at 0. But yes, they've got some of those emotions and those feelings. And even if they can't feel them, most of them are smart enough to know they're supposed to have them. So say remorse, or, you know, some of those types of things. So if you approach it, and that's how we did in the behavioral analysis unit, was we had nothing to offer people that we were trying to elicit information from. We couldn't, you know, overturn the conviction. We couldn't give them a stay of execution. We couldn't change prison, give them steak instead of chicken, none of those things. So we appealed to their ego and then had our sense of empathy that, gee, we understand, and I might have done something just like that in the same position. And you were so good at what you did. Could you let me know a little bit about how you went about doing that?
And all these stories are in this book. Obviously, my dyslexia, I'm waiting for the physical book, but I'm going to the second round. And we're going to go ping pong. You know my brain work. And I need to say, Jana is the best. The first time that we talk, I sent an email says, I cannot believe your follow-up. I was under the impression you never allow me to talk with you again. I was all over the place, like jumping like a kid in Christmas Day with a full tree. Something I read in the book that I think is fascinating. And again, I think you took the life that I want to have. And now I have the chance to see it through your eyes. When you says to your boss on the police, I want to apply to the FBI, he says, you're not gonna get it. And says, actually, if you made it, not only gonna give you $15 or $50 plus the best recommendation letter, tell me while you still have on a picture hanging in your office.
So it was 15, not 50.
15. Oh my God, how cheap he was.
A real cheapskate, even for then, right? And so his tough love, if you will, I think he was trying to let me down before I even tried it. He said, well, they're not going to take you. Yeah. And I don't know, maybe it was the look on my face or whatever. He goes, well, if by some off chance they do, I bet you $15 they won't. So when I did make it, his this is typical law enforcement culture. His congratulations to me was he laminated the $15, so I couldn't spend it. He laminated it on a plaque and imprinted "Good luck in Butte." Now, back at the time when J. Edgar Hoover started the FBI, and they followed up on it for the next decade with different directors, if you were not in favor with the Bureau, but that you had not done anything to be fired for, but you embarrassed the Bureau, they would send you to Butte. And that office was considered a hardship office. It had harsh weather. It was cold. At the time, it was remote, didn't have amenities. So if you were married and had kids, you know, your wife and kids didn't want to go with you. Notice I said wife because there were no women in the unit then. But yeah, that was the way he rewarded me by telling me I was going to go to Butte.
How are you going to say it? So I know that I went ahead, but you have so many stories that there's so many ways we can angle this interview. And actually, this is the pre-show. We're going to do one with Jenna in January about the body language of victimology, how certain victims become victim, and how you can be lured, and what things that you can do. And we're going to go to your career, but there are things that I love. When Douglas invited you to the VA unit, your test was that he put like horrible crime scenes and pieces, pictures in the desk to see if you blinked, and you're looking like, do you have anything else to show me?
Yeah. So that was, we had an interview, the first part of it, he and John Douglas, the unit chief, and another agent were sitting there asking typical questions like, why do you want this position? What do you bring to, what are your skill sets? What experience have you had? Blah, blah, blah. Then they were silent, and he pushed 5 8x10 very bloody, gruesome crime scene photos with victims in them across the desk, and didn't ask any questions. And so it seemed like a minute or two, was probably about 20 seconds. But I said, well, what do you want? You didn't ask me any questions. He goes, I know. I said, well, you're just staring at me, and it's a little uncomfortable. He goes, I'm observing you. And I said, okay, what for? He said, I wanted to see if you grimace, exhale, faint. I was watching your body language. And here I go with my expressions. Sometimes I shouldn't have. I said, well, what makes you more qualified? I said, I looked you up, and this is before Google. And I said, you were a tennis instructor in the military before you came in, and I was a detective in the police department. So why would you be more qualified? Right after I said that, I'm like, oh, this is a guy I'm trying to get a job from. So I don't recommend that as an interview strategy, but it was just an impulsive reaction.
But that's what happened on the real field. So all this diplomacy and pillows that we have in corporate America, you don't have time. You were ended up marrying after with a SWAT person that, like, is AOL, end of life, bullet between the eyes, or handcuff. You decide how to live. But again, I get too far. Let's go back to, you cannot get to the academy. You get to the academy, you work in juvenile. How was the progression until, well, we went to the scene with Douglas? Most people don't know Douglas and wrestlers are the two people that is portrayed in Manhunt. That's the one that create the unit. They create the first database that we have the chance to analyze the brain and the personality of both serial killers and killers. Instead to kill them, what about if we observe them? So she went there. She was the female. So let's go. I get excited. So you're dealing with juvenile and conflict, and how that follow.
To get into the unit, you mean?
To get in the unit, because we have a story about divorce and getting on the FBI Academy. Most women cannot put up with one, and you put up with both too. So your life is amazing. I don't know where to start and pull, because you have so many examples that kids today should be paying more attention. Like, if you get bullied in school, they don't like you, they don't invite you to the dance. Let me tell you what is life, kid.
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely. But I think in looking at that, if from a personal perspective, I was married the first time around, and nothing wrong with him. We just really grew apart. We were different people. But when I had said for the second time I was going to apply for the FBI, he basically gave me a choice, saying it's me or the FBI, and so I went to the FBI Academy. Yeah, and it was certainly not that simplistic nor that quick, but there had been a progression of conversations and some, I'd say, missteps as to who he thought I was, and it was, again, an underestimation. He thought that since I'd done my police work and probation work, that would be enough. And his comment to me was, well, now that you have that out of your system, it's time for you to settle down. And
he think it was a hitch, like you're gonna scratch it out of your shoulder.
That's a really good analogy. It's like, okay, and he made the decision that it was time, right? And it's like, okay, it was almost like I've supported your little fairy tale long enough, and now it's time for you to settle down. Yeah. So.
He understand. Okay, I don't know. Have you ever saw him and again say, like, I don't know if you ever understood? Did you went through therapy to understand who you married?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, what just happened here? No, I have not. And to his credit, we both, it's like, go on with your life and let's not interfere with each other's from now on. So that was a positive thing.
So you're in the police. Most people says, okay, you're already fulfilled. 1792 come, and it's the only time I'm going to mention because it was historical for women. I promise. No, we're not going to name names on ages, but it's historical for most women who don't know. That's the year that I was born, almost 55 years ago, where women start given the right at that point to start getting equal payment and equal positions. Doesn't mean that the paper says you had it. They're going to make it easy for you. And guess who come to the scene to disrupt this scene? Ms. Monroe, tell us.
Now, I don't know, which part are you talking about?
About when it was equal pay on the 1972, and you keep scaling and you start keeping on places and you start keeping and says like, well, everybody was expecting the thing get easy for that, but actually was more resistant for the men and more in the unit. We need to remember at that point, women, like you says, they need to be secretaries.
Well, that's right. And to your point, what I would tell people is there was no welcome wagon, right? It's not like the men went out of their way to be mean, but they ignored me. They never invited me in anything. And I told Susan, I'm plagiarizing someone else's expression, but they certainly did not give me a seat at the table. So what I say was, then you bring a folding chair. So I would invite myself to arrest. I mean, you would overhear things, or I would talk to some of the guys and they'd say, we are going on, never include me in anything. So I would do the extra homework and find out, okay, they're doing an arrest on this. They've got a search warrant. I would be already on it. I'd go up and tell the case agent on it. Okay, I know we're doing X, Y, and Z. What time do we leave? And then they were like, you're not invited or included. They didn't say that. They didn't really know what to say to me. So I just show up and go on the arrest. And pretty soon I was the one that, they would test me, I think, hoping I would fail, just throw me the handcuffs when we were in a situation. They did that several times for me to go ahead and make the arrest without telling me in advance that that's what was going to happen. But I felt very fortunate. Again, it's not like I had done something other than law enforcement before coming in, so it wasn't new to me.
When was the right moment to say, okay, I'm ready for the FBI? Because that is an strength that says, okay, it's now or never. And for your personality, I don't think was like, I'm going to try it. If I fail, I'm going to do it again. I have you play chess in your head. I would have played chess with you in real life either. So, but the place was the right moment. How was the right moment and how was the process?
Okay, so for me, the right moment, I was looking at, I stayed a little bit longer in the police department, actually, because I was having a really good time and I was learning a lot. But then I was looking at my dream career was the FBI. And I thought, this is the time to do it. Everything seemed to be aligned with that. And then I'm going to make a reference, which will seem really campy now, to an old movie called Flashdance. Now, the reason I'm referencing that is if you think about it, she was a girl that she was gorgeous, right? But she was a steel worker. I mean, talk about incongruent. Here she is gorgeous, and by night she's a flash dancer. If you would, it's pretty risque, not pornographic, but pretty risque. But her whole thing was she wanted to become a dancer, and all the people the women and men too, she was competing against were from Juilliard, and she was pretty much self-taught. And it shows how she fails the first time. She does not do a good job, but she gets up, dusts herself off. This is during an audition, and asks if she can do it again. And she does a phenomenal job. I went to see that movie by myself. I'd never gone to see a movie by myself. I thought that was weird, that I would go do that. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, if she can do that, I can do it. And it's time to do it now. And I put my application in the following day.
And we know that already you have the $15 plated on in a great recommendation. So you get in. So I'm sure that when they says, okay, you're getting in, this is going to be your desk, your typewriter, you're going to do briefings of the things that the big boys are doing. How you went from like, we don't expect anything from you to, I'm going to talk to Ed Camper. Actually, Ed Camper, okay, let's put it this way. Ed Camper called her. Mm-hmm. It says, I want to talk with her and about a case you have. Okay, how many? 9? Like, let's put it there.
Yeah.
So how you get there from this is your typewriting to like, no. Ed Camper is going to know me. My name was so well known on the force that Ed Camper want to talk with me. How you do the transition is fascinating.
Well, and what you also said, I'll go back to Susan, that sounds weird, but my favorite serial killer is Edmund Kemper for a variety of
Me
reasons.
too.
Yes, the man is brilliant, and you look at he's totally diabolical. He is literally and figuratively a picture of a narcissist and a psychopath. The man has no remorse. He knows what it is intellectually. So there's a lot of intricate parts going to him. But again, I was not invited on different interviews. I was not included. So I did the research on some things and made the interview myself. I went and did that. And then I had some telephonic calls. And those were the things then that I think we kind of, not a quid pro quo like in the movie Silence of the Lambs, but I would give him a little bit of information. And then I believe I was able to appeal to his ego, letting him know that he was very helpful. I appreciated his intelligence, those sorts of things. So then he took the initiative to help me on a case. So
that's brilliant. And we can, again, this is so much we can talk. Elva, I've been for 25 years talking with Jana. Do you have any question? I'm sorry, my love. This is the conversation with Jana. Like I bombard her. Like, so you have any question before we go into the nitty gritty of the FBI?
No, I just want to keep going.
Okay, perfect.
Yes, it's so interesting. So yeah.
So you go to the FBI. What was your first assignment, your first unit? How would progression until Douglas says, we're going to do this unit, you're going to be in charge? That is not the first time. Let's put it clear. She's not the first time that was calling like, I don't know how to spell that. You want me in charge? We're going to talk about the future. So,
in the academy, after when you're halfway through, they give you your office and they play with you. And I say that they say, which top 5 offices do you want? And then they don't give you any of them. So I think it's a loyalty test, but they make you get up in front of the room and tell everybody. So it's pretty telling because you can see the look on somebody's face, right? And mine was not good. I have photos of that, but I had never, this is ridiculous, but I'd never been to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it really wasn't on my radar screen. And I'm reading it on this, and I didn't even know how to spell. I'm like, I didn't say it out loud, but I'm trying to Albuquerque.
I don't know how to spell it either.
Albuquerque. I mean, it's spelled right. So I was really paused for a long time for me because I tend to speak somewhat at a quick cadence. And I was up there for like 6-7 seconds. And I'm like, and our class instructor goes, you don't know where you're going? I felt like saying, I know where I'm going, but I can't understand how you pronounce this. But yeah, I went to Albuquerque, New Mexico. Nothing wrong with New Mexico itself, but there are so many Indian reservations there. And that was the work that I was given. And I worked a lot in Gallup. For those of you who have not been to Gallup, New Mexico, it's somewhat sad. It's predominantly all reservation. And so there's a lot of poverty there. There was a lot of alcoholism, not many amenities. And I certainly, as a female, was not welcomed on the reservation to conduct some of my investigations. So in order to accomplish
at that point, you were used to that.
Yeah,
not being welcome.
But
you're welcome not to get you to be well. You used to not to be welcome. So it's like, okay, another rock. Let's jump a little higher.
Yeah, here's another place I'm not welcome. Okay, come on, let's move. But anyway, I would take a male partner with me so that at least that would allow them to feel comfortable enough to go ahead and answer my questions. The interesting part was I would ask the questions, I'm taking the notes, and the response would be given to my male partner, the eye contact and everything would be given to my male partner. But I got the job accomplished, whatever it takes.
So from dealing again for nose, how you follow from there?
Okay, so then from Albuquerque, I was transferred. That's when Dale, my husband, and I got married, and he was in Tampa, Florida. So they transferred me to Tampa, Florida. And I was then on what the Bureau used to call, the FBI used to call the reactive squad, which is a criminal squad. And that is bank robberies, fugitives, those types of things, anything that was a criminal act. So I was the first woman on that squad in Tampa, Florida.
And it's a really well-known case. And actually something that Jana set it up and set history. Again, it was an old case. Doormat case that went for a long time, and somebody found a note on that, and you did something that everybody says you're nuts, but you resolve a case. So tell us a little about the case and how you says, I'm gonna go against the no, I'm gonna go against out of the options they give me, and you resolve a case, and it's so simple now, but we need to understand that more than, I don't know, and say how many years ago, coming with an idea, being a woman and resolving a case that way, and showing everybody that you did it. It was amazing. Amazing from the standpoint that give the family peace. Please understand, I'm super excited. They're going to misquote me. Please, Jenna.
Okay, well, to make it an executive summary, a mother and two daughters, the Rogers case, were brutally killed. They were on vacation from Ohio. I'll skip a lot of it, but they were found dead, floating. They'd been dead for over 48 hours in Tampa Bay. They were partially nude. They had been bound and gagged and had weights of 55 pounds. So on each one of them, with the intent they stay at the bottom of the ocean. The killer underestimated the buoyancy of the gases of natural artifact. After death, they floated to the top. I was there because I was a coordinator in the field to the behavioral analysis unit, so I had connectivity with them. I was there, worked on the case. The jurisdiction was St. Petersburg Police Department. They did a great job. However, the case did go cold, and it had a huge negative impact on Tampa, which a lot of Florida, like Orlando and Disney World, is tourist driven, right? Well, the tourists, that's not safe. I don't want to go there. So tourism just tanked. So the case went cold. And in the interim, I was transferred to the behavioral analysis unit. So now I'm working there. And after a case goes cold, it is, you can take it to the behavioral unit. So they brought it there. We looked at we started all over. They brought all of the evidence. We looked at it. There was tables and everything. So I said, what about that note? There's a note there. And it was directions from a hotel, which is very close to the pier. And they said, well, Joan Rogers wrote that. I said, how do you know that? There was silence. I said, how do you know that? Did someone tell you she wrote that? No. Well, we need to know whose handwriting that is. So the detectives went to Ohio, talked to the father. He said, that's not my wife's. That's not my daughter's handwriting. I don't know that handwriting. So again, before the internet, I said, why don't we go? Because I lived in Tampa, big street, the biggest street in Tampa, El Mabry, was kind of like a freeway. Everybody had billboards. So we went to the community who wanted to help because we didn't have the money to pay for billboards. They said, put whatever you want up there. So we blew up the note in handwriting, cursive handwriting. And within 48 hours, there were numerous calls, and 3 at least that gave the same name. Now, the reason they knew this person, because you'd think that today there again, it's very different, is he was in Florida, you have to have an enclosed patio, a screened in, or the bugs will eat you. So he was doing that kind of work on his own, with his own business. And apparently he did very shoddy work because he was in small claims court with several people. Well, to add insult to injury, these people wanted their money back. And he would not only not give them the money back, he'd write them insulting letters, 2, 3, 4 pages long. So they were certainly familiar with his handwriting because he really angered them. And ended up, long story short, it was Oba Chandler. The investigation continued with great work from investigators in the field. When he was apprehended, he was given the death penalty.
You were already on the VAU unit, already on the FBI?
Yes.
Oh my God, my mouth. I get too excited again. I just blew it. Sorry. So that's Jana, and that's me. Everybody knows me. Maybe you don't know Jana, but I always put my foot in my mouth. So before that, so we know that you were invited to the police. You were invited to the FBI. You invite yourself with your folding chair to the table. How you get invited, or what folding chair did you bring to the table to get lure you or were invited to the behavioral unit? Because again, there were a lot of women on the FBI. She was the one invited on. She was the first one in the unit. So how that happened?
Well, I think I'll go back to the Tampa office when I said I was a coordinator. And what that means is I worked with the behavioral analysis unit in Quantico, knowing the criteria that they had to look at a case, because the serial homicide was not a federal violation. So it was either a sheriff or a police department. So we had all this criteria. They had to have done X, Y, and Z. And if they had done all that and the case was still cold, I would work with them to get, all the forensics together, the photographs, the crime scene, the interviews, all of that together, box it up and take it to Quantico. So they knew me at that point in time. And then what I would do is offer to do extra work. So there'd be other cases, and it was not fun work. I mean, it's like leg work. One of them was thallium. There was a thallium poisoning case. and they didn't know what thallium was, what the effects could be, blah, blah, blah. So I did all the research on that. And I did that in my spare time because that had nothing to do with my casework at Tampa, and I didn't want one to interfere with the others. So just by way of example, I did some surveillance, like from midnight to 5 on some things at the airport, just so that I could show and demonstrate my work ethic.
So you already proved again yourself, over deliver, under promise, over deliver, like always you do, Jenna. And how is the conversation to, okay, you can show, but you touch some nerve, some point, because I have the feeling that you touch nerves more than serving coffee to people to get their attention. And you know what? It's okay. It's your style. Again, the force is another world, and who never has joined as a friend, as a guest, as a part, as a trainer, whatever, you don't understand. It's another world. When you call 2:00 in the morning because somebody's inside your house, they're not going to be thinking if there's proper or not, break the door. When your kids miss and for 5 hours, they're not going to be asking to neighbors. They need to action. So all this be fluffy and politically correct doesn't work, because what? You need to get things done. So how you get invited to the table?
That's exactly right. And you do have to get things done. And that's something for another conversation, what you were talking about, the fluffy, the PC, politically correct, all that. I had to relearn that and put that into my arsenal, a toolkit when I got into corporate America. Very different. But what you're talking about is command and control. There again, you don't have time to analyze, ask additional questions. You're given X amount of information in exigent circumstances. And I think I had enough cases where I'm not going to say proven, but I'll use the word demonstrated that I could do those cases. And I think the one case that John Douglas had invited me to after the initial interview, he wanted to he was giving me the opportunity to look at how they did the cases, at Quantico. And he said, you sit in the back of the room, don't say anything. And he repeated that twice. Don't talk, don't say anything. Got it. So they're at a big conference table, like a CEO's room, 3 detectives, John and 2 other agents, and they're doing the case, talking about it. I'm listening. And then they were deliberating over marks that were under the victim's breasts, and they were symmetrical. Back and forth banter. Excuse me. Then John goes, Jana, what do you think? And see, this is a lesson that if you're being told to be quiet in the room and not participating, don't take a power nap. Don't let your mind wander. Pay attention. So I got up and spontaneously looked at the marks and just said, oh, that looks like the marks, especially if you're heavily breasted or after a long day, from an underwire bra. Now, most women would say the same thing. So it wasn't brilliant, but they hadn't thought of that at all. And there was silence on all of this. And it was the next day that John offered me the position.
Wait. A female piece of the clothing get to, oh my God, that is an irony. I never heard that in anybody. Okay, let's be clear. Lipsticks and Guns and lipsticks. And she's the first female in a piece of underwear that get you there. Come on, you need to see that.
We could do guns and lingerie.
Maybe. No, guns and lipstick. I love guns and lipstick. Lingerie is for another. Lingerie get too naughty.
A different conversation.
We're gonna get too naughty there. So, but how crazy it is. Is the right comment. It's not that you need to participate in all the conversation, just in the part of the conversation when nobody knows that nobody knows what they don't know, and you know what they don't know.
Right. And I think, again, I'm not trying to say that it was anything subversive, but the only time I was invited into the conversation was when there was something that stumped them. So I think they assumed it would stump me too. So it would kind of level the playing field. But yeah, like I said, almost any woman would be able to have said the same thing. But I think that's another indicator for diversity and all kinds of diversity, right? Differences in experience. But in this particular case, they'd never had a female there. And a lot of things that are just common sense and common nature to us are foreign to them.
Definitely. I have worked with some people at the FBI, and I look at them like, you must be kidding me, no? Get out of your ass. Don't you see X and Y? Like, yeah. That's as much as I can say. So You're on the game. Thank you to a bra and a lot of effort and bringing your folding chair every meeting that you go. How you keep escalating? You work with one of the hardest people on the FBI, Douglas. Douglas, thank God, is still with us, correct? John Douglas?
Yes,
and
John.
Unfortunately, Robert Ressler, he died in 2013, is one of the people that I couldn't study with because he died before I have the maturity to study with him. Douglas is in my next list. So John Douglas, I don't think you're watching, but wait for my call on my email.
Wow.
But so you were with a guy that didn't give you permission, didn't apologize, didn't give you anything that is granted or because you deserve it. It's because he really thinks that you can do the job and it's not going to affect it. Let's put it this way. You're not going to bring somebody to a unit that no matter how nice it is, if it's going to affect your unit and the group, work on the group. So what was your first assignment? What was your first work, your solo? How escalate from there?
Okay, so I think initially, and it's always good to do this when you're in, at least it's worked for me, when you're new in some area, be quiet, listen, listen to what the vernacular is, listen to how the culture is. When you're in a room with the meeting, see who speaks, who actually gets paid attention to, who isn't, all of those things. So I looked at all the dynamics, and I think I don't have a landmark case that stuck out. And I would say, Susan, what mine is everything that I did or was assigned, I got it done on time. And John had said, if you have any questions, come to me. Well, I measured that. It's, I didn't want to go bother him with everything. He's the boss. He says, but there is a thing that's flattering about the fact that he had so much expertise and so much knowledge. So when I went in, I never wasted his time, and I would ask specific questions demonstrating that I had already done the work, right? But then I was stumped at this, or I needed guidance to go somewhere else. So after doing that several times, I could sense, and as you could, that there was a little bit more of an acceptance. And I'd say the Rogers case that we just discussed was kind of a milestone for me, because he said, wow, I would never have thought of that. He goes, this is fantastic. And then we had a team meeting. We'd have team meetings occasionally, right? So it wasn't convened just for this, but he announced it in front of the team, which was like unheard of. So that was an FBI compliment.
You work in 850 cases, correct? Holy cow. Some experience now.
Yeah, and again, to emphasize, that's not complete cases. And that was a part of the frustration. Most of the cases where you were working on one aspect, like they'd come to you and say, here's our suspect, we can't get him to talk. Could you give us an interview or interrogation strategy? How would you get him to talk to us? Or this guy is just totally lying. And we know that. What's a nerve that you can touch to maybe get him to tell the truth on something? Or we would actually stage things. I love doing that, where you do, like, if you ever saw an old movie called The Sting, and they make everything. We would have there were 80 agents working on this case. I'm exaggerating. Maybe there'd be like 20, but when there was actually one, and have pizza boxes and cans and stuff to give the impression that agents were working 24/7 on this case, and bring somebody into the room and a ruse is totally legal. Yeah, a ruse, R-U-S-E. You can do that. You can lie, And so the premise on that is that you're not going to get somebody who's innocent to confess to something because it looks like you're working on their case. But we would do those kinds of things in a lot of different field offices and set up what we thought would appeal to the offender or perpetrator, that would get them maybe intimidated enough that it's like, oh, wow, these are maybe not the people I should be messing with. We did certain things on some of the infant deaths, unfortunately, Munchausen syndrome by proxy, where you had very sad thing where you had mothers that would kill their kids for attention. We worked on a rash of those. And again, getting the interview techniques with the proper empathy to have them confess to that. So I did lots of components, but very few beginning to end cases.
For the ones who doesn't know Robin Dreck, He was from he was on the FBI. We're gonna have Robin. He agreed to. I don't know if he's watching. I text and said, Robin, guess who's coming tomorrow?
Well,
So
Robin is, whether he's watching or not, that doesn't matter. He is great and extremely competent at his work.
oh, he's brilliant. He's brilliant at with any aspect. He was recruiting Taliban, and actually, I found an Al Qaeda person who was recruiter. So he's going to come in January and February to talk about what is the process of brainwashing. And you work with Susan Carnicero. She went to the CIA. So before we go into Susan, I want to talk about that. Why the FBI, CIA, if it's okay with you. Everybody knows Joe Navarro.
Yes.
Jana have Heart of Darkness because Joe says you don't have any right to keep all that knowledge to yourself, and you choose to do it from the side of the victims more. And because a lot of people talking about bullshit, I'm going to take responsibility for that, because I read your book and other people's stories. I'm like, that doesn't match. What Jana says is more logical. And Joe was a rookie, and Joe ended up, and he gave a lovely foreword in your book. You made what's known Joe Navarro. So you put it here. You, as a woman, bring a man to the position. Tell us about how Joe ended up in your unit and working.
Well, so Joe and I were agents together, street agents or field agents, as they call it in Tampa. And he was working in the counterintelligence, more the espionage aspect, as was Robin Dreek in his field office. And I was working the criminal, and that's when I had my connections with the behavioral analysis unit. And when I'd go for trainings, I'd come back. He and I would go out for Cuban toast and coffee, and I would do a download on this is what happened, this is this. And Joe is brilliant, and he picked up on all of that, utilized a lot of these tools in the interviewing that he was doing on his cases. But then the FBI finally realized the oversight that it had by not having a specialized unit that worked in interrogation, nonverbal communication for those to elicit confessions, right? So they started the behavioral analysis program, and Joe and Robin Dreek were two of the first agents to start that unit.
Impressive.
Yeah.
Now, Susan Carnicero, and Google it, please. Just Google it to understand what we're talking about. She was FBI and moved to the CIA, or you coach her and help her and mentor her when she already was in the CIA? And why you're not ended up going to? And if please correct everything that I said and I was wrong or improper.
No, Susan is a very close friend of mine, and we met. It's another one of these. Nobody wants to be invited. She was an intern in the FBI where she was working on her master's degree. And she was the intern. I was gone. I was traveling. And when I came back, it was like, she's a little bit younger than I am, but I'm like, oh, another female. Notice nobody was a woman. Everybody's a female in law enforcement. And I said, how are you enjoying, sitting in on the consultations? And she goes, I haven't been to one. I said, you've been here 5 days. You've been here all week. What are you doing? She goes, basically just sitting in this little office, this cubicle that they've given me. And I said, why? She goes, nobody's invited me to anything, even though they know I'm here as an intern. They, say hello and don't even invite me. I said, oh, we're going to fix that. We're going to fix that right now. So I invited her to one of my consultations, and then all of the other guys there, they had a schedule as to when they were doing things. And once again, we brought our folding chairs and just showed up. And I would give her the case notes or whatever the case was, the background. So she did all of the work on it so that when we were sitting in the consultation, she knew what the case was about. So she could contribute whether asked or not.
And why you didn't choose to go to the CIA and you choose to stay in the FBI? If it's okay to ask to.
Sure. So yeah, the agencies are very different when you look at it. And yes, Susan was not in the CIA at that time. And she then went to polygraph school to become a polygrapher, which is also excellent training. And after she had the credential of polygrapher, she went to become a CIA analyst. She was not an operative. She was an analyst. I chose the FBI over that. Number one, if I was going to join the CIA, I always wanted to do that. I would have been an operative. And looking at that, you have a secret identity in most of the cases. You're someone else. You do a lot of traveling. There's a lot of things that are extremely confidential. And I was married and wanted to remain that way. I'd already had one marriage that didn't work out. And in the FBI, it was more of what I was looking to do, which was investigations, getting information from people, solving crimes. Again, the two reasons that I joined law enforcement, and it might sound a little campy to others, but I love this country. I love the United States and the fact that it's a nation of laws and liberties. And I wanted to do something that would help protect that equilibrium, but I didn't want to be an attorney, with all due respect. Too much paperwork, too much office work. And then I hate bullies. And Susan, you and I talked about, I hate people who take advantage of other people, and people who are vulnerable, women, younger people, elderly, people who just aren't up to the task. And law enforcement is the agency, and the FBI is the epitome of that deals with bullies, the ones who have the authority to deal with bullies. And so to me, it was a natural fit. The CIA elicits information. They don't prosecute crimes like the FBI does. So I got a little bit more immediate gratification instead of
lips and guns. You like the lips and guns. And the CIA, you don't use the guns.
That's right. That's right.
Let's put it that way. So I know everybody was asking about the Silence on Lab, but you need to understand the background, the content and context. It would be unfair if we don't talk about that. That they come with a book in at the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, and they assign you Jodie Foster, who have her book, have her lines, and says, Jenna, this is real. It's just that things doesn't happen. So the things that are real in that movie, they're things to you. Tell me about the experience.
Well, again, I'd say I advised Jodie Foster. She certainly didn't need any coaching, and she's an excellent actress, very very professional. But when the whole team was down, and I say down in the behavioral science unit, it was two in a basement underneath the gun cleaning vault at Quantico, 2 floors below that, and it was originally designed as Hoover's bomb shelter. So it didn't have ventilation, and I could always, when people were cleaning their guns upstairs, they'd come in my air conditioning vent, and all I could smell Hoppies. Hoppies is the name of gun cleaning fluid, and I like, oh, to Hoppies, I'm gonna make a cologne out of that. But anyway, when Jodie Foster was there, she showed me excerpts of the script and said, would you say something like that? And I'd say either yes or no. And then she'd say, well, what would you say? I'd say this, or then there was some acronym, and I'd say, that's not how you say that. And so the goal was to make it something fictitious, as genuine and authentic as possible. And so then there was the Yellow Brick Road, which Quantico, the FBI Academy, Quantico is on the Marine Corps base. And there's a Marine Corps obstacle called the Yellow Brick Road, which the agents have to run. And it's a real obstacle course, with nets and things you jump over and all that. And she was going to have her double do that. And I thought, well, you're in good shape. You're younger than I am. Why don't you do it? And she worked with the PT instructor, Larry Bonney, an agent, to get in shape. And when I say get in shape to be able to do that obstacle course. So we tried to do things like that would make it more authentic.
Let's be clear. She not only coached Jodie Foster, she lured her to do her own stunt. This is Jenna Monroe. Okay, quote. So that I understand that for 2 years, the FBI need to have a special unit for PR for the man or women who says, I want to be on the FBI. So the big avalanche of women joining the team is thanks to you.
Well,
the great job that you did.
Yeah, well, thank you. But yes, it drew so much attention, and the media, the PIO, Public Information Officer, was located at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. Well, they started getting flooded with calls, and headquarters was not that well versed on what they used to say. What do you people do there? What
you people do?
So we were certainly not mainstream. And so they watched the movie, and that was really the only education they had on what us people did. And so they got so many calls, the information officer there, he said, I can't handle this. And then the other calls that we get on cases. So they retained a woman by the name of Kelly Sabulis, who was we called a support person. She was doing administrative work. So she came down on a full-time basis for, I think, about 18 months to handle all the calls, the requests. and sort through. They did allow access to some people, other people who were making movies or people who were writing books to come to the unit. And they actually had to stop that because, as you can imagine, we're trying to work, and then you have authors and writers or people that want to come down and talk to everybody. So had to come up on the job, right, with some criteria as to who was allowed access and who was not.
Talking about access and talking on the wrong place. It was Ed Kemper, the one who invited beers to police and agents on the bars to learn how the police work.
Yes, and that's when you look at things you learn other than about the method or the modus of operandi of how somebody killed. What Edmund Kemper told us was how he kept so current on the case was they used to call it the local watering hole, meaning a bar. And local specifically, I know this from being a police officer, would go to a bar after work, and I'm not talking about getting drunk or anything, go out and have a beer. I was always the odd one there too. I'd go out and I wanted champagne, and most of the dives you went to didn't have champagne, so I made them go to a nicer place. But anyway, and so they all knew who Ed Kemper was. I mean, how do you miss him? The guy's 6'9" at the time, probably 350 pounds. He was heavy at that time. But he would listen. Number one, he'd listen. He'd sit at the next table, and they spoke, not in whispers. They'd talk about the case, their frustration. Then one of the officers noticed him there, and Ed told the bartender, buy a round of drink for the officers. Well, then they invited him over to the table, and we're talking about the case. Now, I'm sure not, suspect names or that kind of thing, but enough when you're as bright as he was that he knew where they were looking, the type of things that they were doing.
That's called elicitation. That's called elicitation. For the people who talk about elicitation is gathering information without doing questions, even though the police is really good. You need to remember, Kemper was more intelligent than Einstein. So you need two Einstein to get on the IQ of Ed Kemper. So bad he was ruined since the kid. Again, not justifying, but if you learn about the childhood, the upbringing of Ed Kemper, he wasn't a serial killer when he started being a serial killer. He killed already his grandparents and was on an institutionalized. But let's put it this way: if he wouldn't have a good upbringing as a kid, I don't know who could have been conquered, because he come up with things and he could have went like, I'm done killing, pick me up.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't. Yeah. But it goes back to a question when you talk about nature or nurture. And I'm one of those who believes it's both. It's a combination. We don't have time to go into the research for that. But I think with him, it wouldn't have made any difference. He could have been raised by the best parents in the world, because I think with him, it was nature. And you're right. He killed his grandparents at age 15 and called his mom and said, I killed my mom, grandma and grandpa. You might want to come and pick me up. I was just totally no emotion, and that was her parents.
You went to the private sector, but first we're going to talk about the cyber unit. That I want to ask you something that's more personal, because I work with a couple of lawyers preparing people to testify, and suddenly the lawyer look at you and they don't understand. And it happened with Anthony. The case of the mother who apparently Casey Anthony, where when they interviewed the juror number 3, beside that, the lawyer was exceptional, and on the open statement, closing statement, to me, one of the best defense lawyers, one of the best open and closing statement I heard in a long, long time. Casey Anthony case is when they asked the juror number 3 why they let her go, and says, first, the lawyer was really intelligent not to take the death penalty out of the table. So as soon as you doubt, you're not going to send somebody to be killed. Brilliant strategy for the lawyer. Chapeau. Let's talk about strategy. Don't shoot me. I'm taking responsibility for this. And the second one is nobody, the DA office couldn't show us how did they die, what happened with the body, nothing like in the TV. So all this fascination for shows, CSI, behavioral unit, all those things are fascinated, actually is made in your life a freaking mess. Now I cannot believe, but even though in the 90s and 2000, it was crazy how much people was trying to be a cop or get the nose out there, how much is revealed about reality and all the shows. It's crazy. What is your, if you want and if you can, give an opinion about how much damage to the work that people is doing today?
Yeah, I think damage, I guess, is a good word. And part of the reason I'm going to give the context to that, I believe many people, I won't say all, but the majority, you'll see something on a medium, be it TV, streaming, podcast, whatever. And it's like, well, I heard it there without going any further. Like, well, who's the annotation, right? Was that person qualified, or were they the janitor? Nothing against janitors, but they probably shouldn't be giving advice on serial killers. So you look at the shows and they will put all that stuff out there. And some of it are real techniques. They're real things that law enforcement does. And you look at smart people that are watching this because they want to do something devious, right? And it's like,
you have Ed Campers. Okay. He's not the only one. You have Ed Campers out there.
He's not the only one. Yeah. So they're like, I didn't know you could do that. I mean, back when you look at forensic files, they're always talking about luminol. So when that first came out and people are like,
you didn't have that. Yeah, when did luminol come up? So let's be clear. Jana, when DNA didn't exist, when you sent things to the lab, it didn't take 2 minutes, take up to 2 months. You cannot hold somebody in a jail for 2 months. Maybe that person flee the country. So the things how you see it on the TV, neither were on the 70s. You were given, if I'm not mistaken, $19 a day to sleep in a hotel in a case. So you ended up sleeping sometime in your car because it was more decent than the hotel.
Yes.
People they stop romanticizing. It's not true. They use the TV as a TV show. No, Jana?
Oh yeah, so many of the things. We could go on and on and on, right? And it's like when you also see either police officers, agents, arguing with the judge and doing all this, and they just dramatize, walk out of the. You wouldn't be getting your case across like that. And I think the biggest thing when you talk about DNA, because we would get all these complaints. Well, I saw Law and Order and they got it back the next day. And I said, well, that's the problem. Law and Order. And you look at the backlog of cases that they have, and you look at labs where some labs are done. I think I'm a little biased, but the FBI lab was excellent. And some of the other labs, when you look at state and local labs, and they
cross-contamination. Because they don't have utensils.
No.
Let's be clear. When you cut founding and the swabs they need to use and clean the things to make sure that it's not cross-contamination so a criminal don't go away, guess what? Guess where they cut? They cut on that end. So when you have cross-contamination, when you have error, that is when you're cutting money on the wrong place. And FBI was kind of well-funded compared with some small labs in small towns.
Absolutely. And then you look at the preservation of evidence. I was on the founding team of our evidence response team back in the early 90s. And that's exactly what that was, honing in on the collection and preservation of evidence. And there is so much, it depends on whether it's blood, whatever the evidence is, the different, you're looking at heat, you're looking at, cold, what types of things, how to preserve it so that when you have a case, that's going to actually be authentic. It's not like, oh, well, we stuck it in an envelope and put it in the closet, and that has so much to do when you're looking at trials, is that preservation. And if, like you said, there wasn't DNA, we were so fortunate that the things, a lot of the forensics had been preserved properly so that when it was time for a DNA test, it actually proved some cold cases. That was thrilling. Something that was like 12 years old. And it's like, oh, but we have this little freckle burr, that's only found in Australia, and that sort of a thing. So I think when you look at the ability to preserve that also is a time consuming thing. And you look at TV, and once again, everything's done right away. And I think the other part, now this is just a very personal thing that I see on TV shows today, is the cavalierness. And I know that makes for great show, but everybody's like, F this and F that and not, and if you behave like that in most of the places, you'd be fired. So again, it's great for entertainment and drama, but that's not the real behavior most of the time.
Yeah, when you cross your arm, you do this with the shoulder, you're not going to get in jail. My problem is, do you think you learn from that? I was crossing my arm completely so people can see me. She was mad with Jana, like I was completely cognitive, overloaded, sucking. Like you see, Elba is like completely hypnotized by you. So most people doesn't know either, and it's not that to demystify an institution that I would have loved to be part of and I couldn't, is they don't ask you politely when you need to go to a place. And you didn't want to, but you ended up with the assistant, and I take notes because I'm not going to name, assistant director for the cyber department of the FBI. And guess what was her answer when they proposed to you? What you says? How it's spelled?
I said, oh, no, this was Director Mueller. I said, oh, no, thank you. I'm sure you'll find somebody else more qualified. I'm very happy where I am being the special agent in charge of Los Angeles. And that's when I learned that he didn't have a great sense of humor, or if he did, he chose not to. And he looked at me and he said, you don't seem to understand. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you. Like, oh, okay. Yeah, it was just, yeah. So, yeah, that was a huge step, because you take yourself back to right after 9/11, and the FBI did not have a cyber division. It had cyber entities, meaning in each one of the then 56 field offices, you had an agent or two working on cyber. A division is where it's funded by Congress. It's established. You get that funding for after you're telling them what it is your goals are, what it is your capacity, what you can do. So a lot of my work was testifying on the Hill before congressional and Senate subcommittees, explaining just that. This is some of the capabilities, and this is why you should give us millions versus Secret Service, or since we have concurrent jurisdiction, which the FBI and Secret Service does, who's going to do what? You need to figure all those things out. You have to do deconfliction. Well, it's better to do deconfliction in the beginning instead of letting the agents do that out in the field.
You did an honor job, and that's the year I came to United States. And if we are safe, it's like people like you. So thank you very much for your service and that. But as a person who have fight so much, and again, stop me and say, Susan, that is BS. I'm not going to take it personal. You have fought so much, and you were in this acceleration, and the adrenaline part, that talking with serial killers, helping people, thinking about the victim, and suddenly you hit this wall where you need to be talking as congressman. It was a great job. But what happened with Jana, that was the adrenaline, the fighter, and love to do all those things? What happened with that? How was the transition? Because again, they don't ask you. They tell you where you need to grab. They give you the box. That's how it works. They give you a paper box, and it says the new office is there. But
you're right. A cardboard box, and maybe two if you're lucky, and say, go down the hall and turn left. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, the one incident that I did tell you that was more than deflating to me was you're invited, right? I'm representing the FBI. I'm representing Director Mueller on the cyber division. I was invited to a hearing on the Hill, and my testimony was going to be on phishing and capacity. What kind of capacity were they going to be paying millions of dollars for? What could the FBI do in real time for the crime against terrorism? So, of course, the team had prepared my comments. And if you see people on C-SPAN or whatever, you read them. It's not like you're giving a speech, right? You read them. It's very measured, very prepared. And so I'm reading it, and they call it backbench. I have a very technical expert sitting behind me, just in case someone were to ask a question that was more technically, above my head. Anyway, I start talking, and I realized then the senator who was asking a question, all of a sudden he's like talking to the guy next to him, and somebody else with a cup of coffee is walking behind somebody else, and I really, nobody's even listening to me. So I said, are you even listening? You invited me here, and it doesn't look like anybody's paying attention. Before I could finish my sentence, they shut off my mic. And it was just, I was like, and it was a great lesson, because the lesson for me was, I'm still altruistic. I'm going to help save the world. I'm going to make my case. This is going to be compelling testimony. They're going to hopefully grant us the funding. And so my backbench agent comes up to me and goes, I think we're dismissed. I said, well, our time isn't up. He goes, they're not going to let you speak anymore. And we left. So
Jana, you're never gonna change.
It was very, I know that now, but it was
Thank God.
It was very disheartening.
So because one of the worst things that I have seen in people, even with soldiers, with agents, is to civilize the civil life. They cannot be civilians. The adrenaline, I miss I said my near FBI was politics. I did it for 18 years, never took a vacation. I get burned out. And I says, the only thing I regret in my life is living politics. I regret it every day. I regret the adrenaline, not to be politically correct, know that you're behind the scene. And I can relate to that again, completely different. She saved life. I put assholes on the White House. Let's make the measurement different. So I put the criminals, she put the handcuff. Let's put it that way.
It's a better way.
She put the handcuff.
I love it, Susan.
I give you work. So with that says, I miss the adrenaline. I miss that the 2:00 in the morning call, that something happened. People who hasn't been on those positions romanticize the situation, but don't understand the pressure and like it. So in my case, I regret it. I couldn't civilize ever. And this mine is fucked up for that reason. So how you manage to have a civil life, and we're going to talk about the Hair of Darkness, and you writing a novel, then I do understand you're going through the FBI to make sure that when people like Jana write a book, it's not that she sit and write. She needs to go to a committee. They need to review that what you says, how you say it. You don't put the foot on the mouth. You don't hurt anyone. Like, guys, you don't know the work that it takes for somebody like Jana to write a book. So you left. Joe says, you need to do Joe Navarro, you need to do the book. Book go out, people start knowing you, writing a novel. How is the progression?
So yes, to Joe. Joe would do that every year, Susan. He would call me, and we text in between, but he would call me, and it became almost like a joke. And he'd say, Jana, when are you going to write your book? Jana, this year you need to write your book. He was relentless in a nice way. But the process, I did transition because everybody needs to retire from the FBI. I transitioned a little and retired a little bit earlier because I knew I wanted to get into corporate, and age discrimination is alive and well. So I thought at the earlier part of 50 versus the latter part of 50, I would have more of an opportunity and more success. So I did join corporate, and that adrenaline that you're referring to, I didn't realize that I had lived on that for over 30 years. And what that law enforcement cocoon, right? Command and control law enforcement. You can have information here, you make decisions because you need to before, Yep, so in corporate, totally different. Totally
horrible guys. Corporate, they can hold a file for 6 months in a desk and says, we have a lawsuit, we have a discrimination case, cannot be sitting on the desk for 6 months. Like, we haven't done the decision. HR didn't tell us, like, we don't have time for HR.
Yeah, I could go on and on. And it's not corporate's fault. I'm not blaming people, but that culture, that world was so foreign to me. And I was just taken aback by God. Can't anybody make a decision around here? And I got in a little bit of trouble when I was at my first corporate job.
I'm sorry, really? You got in trouble because things are not working the way they should, and you want to fix it?
Yes, and I want to fix it. And the thing that meeting discipline or lack thereof, right? Okay, you said the meeting's going to start at 2:00. Well, it should start at 2:00, right? I mean, why not? So not this place, right? People come straggling in, and some people be eating at the. And these are executive vice presidents, senior vice presidents. I was just appalled. So the CEO also did that, right? And he comes in late. The meeting was like 20 minutes late. He comes in, and to his credit, he was a runner and he worked out a lot. So you could tell at least he took a shower. His hair was wet and a little disheveled. He comes in and starts eating a sandwich. Doesn't even say anything to us. And now it's 22 minutes late. And we're all sitting there. I'm thinking, we have things to do. And I was on the calendar, but I was probably the lowest ranking person in that room as a vice president. And so I said, well, I see I'm first on the agenda, but obviously the CEO always starts the meeting, but I was first on the agenda. So I said, well, now that everyone's here, I think I should start the meeting. And the CEO goes, well, you always seem to like to be in charge, so go right ahead. And it was not in a nice manner. So I realized then I had overstepped, but I'm just thinking, we're supposed to all just sit here like minions until somebody decides to start a meeting, and all of us have things to do. So that was that. And then, some of I'll just refer to it as dog eat dog sort of a thing. People trying to, jockey for other people's jobs, that kind of thing was hard to get through.
What do you miss about those days on the force? Either the police, either the Elba was thinking. Elba and
I
we
was
have
thinking
the
of that
synchro.
question.
What
I
were you
mean,
thinking, Elba?
I've been ruining this woman for 8 years. So Elba, since we are the same question, you do it.
Yeah, Jenna, what do you miss about to be in the FBI and the cases and all those things versus today?
Oh, I'm sorry. What do you need?
What do you miss?
What you miss?
Oh, what do I miss?
Sorry.
Well, okay. Now, that question is a little multifaceted because some of the things I miss don't exist any longer. You know the expression, you can never go home. So if
Yeah,
I were to, let's just say all of a sudden, if I were magically younger and they said, go join the FBI, I probably would not recognize it. You know, whole new leadership, everything's different. There's going to be some core values that are the same. So I'm going to answer your question as to what did I miss about my time there? What I missed is when Dale, my husband, and I were in the Bureau, we had the great honor of working with some of the most ethical, hardworking, honest people that you could ever meet. And I soon became to think that was the world, which was obviously a fallacy. But when you are surrounded by that and you can say, you know, blah, 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 and you don't even have to be questioned because you have that reputation, and so do these people, that you literally, an old term is, you can take it to the bank. And it was such a luxury working with people like that. You let your guard down because then you start thinking, a lot of people are like that. That's why it was great to go back to the behavioral science unit. It was like, oh no, not everybody's like that. I'm talking about the bad guys, not my colleagues. But I think the people that were so ethical and hardworking, I miss the most. And when you talk about the adrenaline, Susan, it's the adrenaline and camaraderie. The camaraderie of the FBI, I would think, equates to that of the military and the police department. A lot of time you are in life and death situations, or even if you're not going to die, it could be something in front of your boss, right? And oops, I stepped on it or whatever, and your partner comes in and goes, oh, well, what you meant by that was somebody that has your back, somebody that wants good for you, and you actually are a team. I miss that tremendously. That was invaluable.
You were part of something that's going to be historic on the forces. You were with Douglas, and I'm going to read last name to not make mistake. Robert Ressler, John Douglas, Joe Navarro, Susan Carnicero, Robin Drake. You have the chance to work with people that is still dead for decades and still being studied on case studies. You were part of what people is going to be study about forensic behavioral unit, and 100 years on the future, you're going to be part of that team. What is right, what you guys did, what you guys discovered, what you got cemented for everybody like crazy like me that love the stories and never was part of people who would like to read about it. You said a story that I don't think anybody today can measure or replicate or mirror the ethical and performance you have. And again, take the responsibility. You need to say anything, but I know many people, we were introduced with people on the force. I work with people, and the new generations, they don't fit you on the bottom of your shoes. What you guys did, what you discover, and the things they had it really more easy and soft today. You're the badass. And for that, I thank you very much, because you have done a job that I hope somebody have the proud to say, at least give the respect to these people and try to mimic the right things.
Yeah, no, I agree with that very, very much. And there's an old saying, and it's basically called the man in the arena. I won't go over the whole thing, but what that means, and that's why I'm proud of people like you, like everybody who is out there trying to do something. You're in the arena, and when you're in the arena, you're going to get criticized. You get compliments or acknowledgement every once in a while, but with all of that comes far more criticism. And as you know better than I, that's human nature, right? And nowadays it's even more, it's easier because you can be a coward. You can do it online. You don't have to say who you can say nasty, vitriolic, accusatory things and hide behind your computer or your phone or something, which that's why I don't give those things much thought. But being human, it still has a detrimental impact when you're being criticized.
And let's put it this way. In your book, Heart of Darkness, Jana talked about, from the person who listened to, I'm waiting for the physical. Yeah, I know, Molt. You too. I think I have the cat who matched with my dress. And Jana and I would love cats too. So, and she's hiding, you see, because it's too cold here in the Midwest.
Malt. I've met Scotch and whiskey. Now I've met malt.
I know you melt all the bar. So with this, I said, you remember that you need to be careful when you talk with Janet. You remember everything. I love about your book is you still talk about the campers, the serial killers, and all the things, but you talk about the victims. You talk about each episode is each chapter from the simple things. I don't know many people who would agree that she was a rookie and she had the loops, the gun, and the handbag caught in the middle of the scene. And by the way, ladies, if you have a Kevlar vest that cover your female parts, guess who designed it? So all those things are in your book. You talk about mistakes. You talk about your big mouth. You talk about putting your food in your mouth. You own it. You teach about it. You talk about the victims. I love it. Why the book that way?
I wrote the book, and my dedication to that. Again, Joe, I could have written it a long time before, and I mentioned this to you, Susan. I think agents in my day were very private. You didn't write about those things. And then I thought people wouldn't be interested in serial killer stuff. And when I was approached to write the book, they said, "Oh, you're very wrong." I'm like, okay. But I wanted to dedicate it because as a culture, people know the name of Dahmer. They know the name of Bundy. They know these names, right? And there are hundreds, unfortunately, hundreds of thousands of victims. Nobody knows their name. And that's okay. You couldn't.
I'm sorry. If you go to a crime, I did a lot of crime presentation for the face reading and things like that. But the point is, okay, name me 5 serial killers. People can name me 1 victim. People like, and they look at each other like, well, you're fucked up on the mind. Thank God, because.
So I wrote it for the too many victims of violent crimes and those who love them. And we talked about this also, is when you look at, there's a victim, right? But with each of them, there's a ripple effect. They have a husband, a mother, a father, friends, a boyfriend, children. It impacts so many people when someone is brutally killed, or just killed. Doesn't even have to be brutally, when you have a death like that. And to me, I wanted to pay respect to those too many victims that are unknown. And by telling some stories, I wanted to tell a little bit about the FBI and give it authentication. I didn't have to look anything up. I lived it. I didn't have to do any research. So that part was easy. But I also wanted to put the sadness of the victim, not the hideous parts in it. I didn't want to make it graphic.
Yeah, it's nothing gruesome. Nothing gruesome. It's extremely well etiquette route about that. So if you are afraid of blood.
Respect to those 99.9% women who were senselessly killed.
Why the next one is a novel?
Okay, the one I'm working on that's, number one, when you talked about previously, is called FBI Pre-Publication Review. And that is a unit at headquarters that has to go over everything that you do. And rightly so, I get that. I'm not criticizing that at all. But it was a process, I was told would take 90 days, and it took 10 and a half months.
You're lucky. You're lucky. I know people who's 2.5 years and we're still waiting for the books.
Yep. So I was told that. Joe told me that. He goes, "Oh, well, you're actually kind of lucky." But so I had a pretty good sense of what I could talk and not. I knew I had my clearances and I knew what to talk about and what not to. But they did have some good recommendations. There was a few things I think I might have been a little hard hitting on that they said, "Why don't you just change your vernacular a little bit," and that sort of a thing. So the novel came up. What I want to tell, I feel very blessed. I have tons of stories. And so if you do a novel where it's like each book is a different story, I know a lot of readers, predominantly women, like those types of things. And so if you get a good character, a good female protagonist.
It's going to be the romantic part of the FBI.
It's going to be, let me see, a compilation of Elba, Susan, and Jana. What do you think? That's going to be but anyway, that way I don't need pre-publication review, and I can write my story, and I can write my stories as genuinely as possible and change the names, and that way there is no nexus.
So what is next for you? I know you do a lot of public speaking. I know that you do a lot of corporate training, not in corporate, but you held corporate enough to not to put your foot in your mouth, not be kicked out on the big door. So what is next for you? Because I think you're going to be like most people I know, they're going to get you kicking and screaming on the pine box. It's not going to be easy. You're never going to retire.
No. Not going to do that. The novel is actually taking quite a bit of time, but I'm excited about it. And it's one of those things I'm finishing. So I think when I finish it, depending on where that goes, that's going to keep me occupied with maybe some more stories. But public speaking is, that's my real inspiration. And the reason is I love attempting to help young women or those that are mired in the middle of their career, predominantly in corporate. You see that where they're a director or a senior manager and they want to be a senior director, they want to be a vice president, and they keep being told no and they don't understand why. I would like to be able to help and support that. So I do enjoy speaking and having that interaction with the audience.
And the next one, when we have Jana, we're going to talk specifically about a couple of cases where CCTV camera was captured from people who was known that was attacked in different kind of attacks on the street. That CCTV was showed to criminals in jail, and guess what? Almost 100% of the criminal picked the same people who was burglarized. So, and Jana specialized in victimology in who's better. So we couldn't have done the show with that. And thank you. Okay, Molt, you're penalized. You're not coming in. So we couldn't have done the show, but I don't think you would understand how important is the first show of the year with Jana, because who else is going to talk about that? Elba, I'm going to let you close because you have been, I'm afraid when you're so silent.
No, I know that I'm used to talk more, but I need to tell you, Jana, it's a pleasure to have you. For me, it was amazing hearing from you and being with you in this conversation. So thank you for that. Thank you for your service. And I hope the next one on January.
Oh,
those one I have a lot of questions.
Okay. All right. Great. I'll look forward to those.
Jana, thank you very much for your time outside camera and for your time in camera. Jana is a doll. And the only thing I want to say is you don't need to be cocky when you're the best. When somebody's too cocky and too full of their own, the real people is like Jana, the one who really moved the needle. And everybody out there actually has crossed path being trained or coached by Jana. So we have the boss.
Thank you. Thank you. It was such a pleasure being on the show, and I wish you guys happy holidays.
Bye, guys. And this is the last show. We're going on a month vacation, not because we are important, it's because we have a lot of work coming on. So live, you're going to see us back on January 12th. You're going to see a lot of recording because the team is amazing and put those things, but me recording, not anymore. Guys, see you in January again. Bye. And if I find out how to head the stream here.